Good afternoon. I am Pam Wycliffe and with Lunch with the League today. And I have a few things that we need to say before we have our wonderful talk by Aaron Nichols. The League never supports or opposes any political party or candidate. We are nonpartisan. We encourage informed and active participation in government. We do have two distinct roles. One is voter services and citizen education, and the other one is action and advocacy. We're nonpartisan, but after a study, we do support positions to advocate for or against particular policies of public interest. And because of that, comments and opinions that you might hear today are not necessarily those of the leagues, but of the individuals. We are here from noon till 1, and we will have, Aaron will speak, and we will have a Q&A at the same time or after. If you would put your questions in the chat, and then Aaron can see them in the chat and respond to your comments or your questions. Please remain muted, which helps with the transmission for everybody. And put your questions in the blah, blah, blah. Okay, and if you want more information about the League of Women Voters for the South Bend area and our positions, please go to www.lwvsouthbend.org. It also has a link to the state and to the National League to find out more about the League. And also you can join from the website. There is a little bit of news that we have to, we don't have to, that I'm going to mention. And that is that the League did put out a press release this week about, and I will just read the title of it. And the League of Women Voters calls for transparency and accountability in the St. Joseph County's redistricting process, because that issue has come up and it has been voted for, and there has been a lot of comments about that. There is a planned public meeting that is scheduled at the Charles Martin Youth Center at 802 Lincoln Way West in South Bend on Monday, the 15th, from 6 to 8 p.m. And the League and the board is encouraging everyone who can attend to go to that meeting. And you can read the press release on either the Facebook page or on the website page. And it wouldn't even hurt if, when you went, that you wore your League button to represent the League, because they are calling for more transparency and accountability in the stance that has already been voted and taken. But now they're going to be looking at it some more. Today, excuse me, unless somebody has anything else that they need to add as far as news go, I will introduce Aaron Nichols, the Executive Director at the South Bend Civic Theatre. He is an award-winning actor, director, and designer. And after completing an executive program in arts and culture strategy at the University of Pennsylvania, he focused on putting those lessons, excuse me, to work here in South Bend. And before he became the executive director in 2017, he was an active volunteer at the Civic and for theaters around the region for about 15 years. And he has said that he believes the Civic Arts organization has a responsibility to reflect its unique and vibrant community, and he does an excellent job. With the title today of American Shakespeare, August Wilson, and the American Century Cycle, I will turn it over to Aaron. And thank you very much for sharing with us all that you know.
I don't think I can share all I know in 30 minutes, but I'll do my best. Thank you so much. And yeah, I will be looking at the chat if there are people over there who have questions, like immediate questions that reflect to something I just said, I'll try to keep my eye on that. But I am going to be focusing on our August Wilson initiative. But I do want to give a little primer to the theater for those of you who may not be familiar. There's 20 of you, many of you are familiar to me, so thank you for being here, and it's nice to see familiar faces. The last 2 years have been a challenge. I say I've been in the position almost 5 years, but I think the last 2 equal 10. And for all nonprofits, that seems to be the case. We are back. We have been doing quite a lot, even in the midst of the worst of the pandemic with virtual and streaming and Zoom and all of that. But I'm happy to say that this summer with our outdoor performances kind of brought us back incrementally. And now we have just finished our second show in our theater again with a lot of protocols in place. And I will say, full transparency, it seems like we're one of the only organizations that is requiring vaccine. And that I will say, I wasn't sure how that would be received, but I'll say it was received very positively. And honestly, ticket sales went up when we announced it. So the reason I think that, yeah, exactly. It's nice to see when the right decision also seems to be the decision that helps an organization thrive. And I think the reason is, and I've heard this anecdotally, is people weren't trusting that the kind of honor system was working. So having that check at the door has been something that has given people the assurance that the people on their left and right shoulder are safe as well. So that just to say, the Civic is committed to so many different initiatives, but one of those is definitely and always public health. So that continues, and we work to keep maintaining that through the year. We'll revise it as needed. It is sometimes harder to pull back those kind of protocols than it is to put them in place. But we'll see how that plays out in the next few months. So yes, thank you for the message over there. It's good to hear people talking positively about that decision. So tell your friends and neighbors, the Civic is safe. We actually had a professional company come in today to get ready for our opening tonight, where the entire building was sprayed down. So not only are we requiring our patrons, but we're kind of internally requiring quite a lot of safety protocols to make sure that the building itself is safe for you to come into. With that said, we have, since 2019, been working on one of the most ambitious projects to date for the Civic Theater, and that is the 10-year program or initiative of the August Wilson Project. We are not the first theater to do this, but probably the first theater in 100 miles to do this, and that is to try to perform all 10 of the American Century Cycle plays. To give you a little more context in what I mean by that is what used to be called the Pittsburgh Cycle is 10 plays, and each one takes place during a different decade of the 20th century, and it chronicles the experiences, triumph and adversity of African Americans within the country. 9 of the 10 are placed in Pittsburgh. 1 of those is placed in Chicago. August didn't originally intend to do this. He had written 2 or 3 plays, realized that each one of those was in a different decade, and was like, this could be really cool, and in the next 20 years, really, I mean, honestly, I think it was less than that, probably 15 years, cranked out all 10 of these plays. 2 of them won the Pulitzer Prize, multiple awards throughout the cycle. The plays that many of you may be familiar with, Fences is probably the most popular. That was just turned into a feature film with Denzel Washington and Viola Davis. If you didn't see it, it's a lovely production of that. Ma Rainey's Black Bottom just came out last year on Netflix with Chadwick Boseman and Viola Davis again. Again, a beautiful adaptation. But there are 10 separate plays, each one, like I said, set in a different decade, that are part of this American Century Cycle. In 2019, when I kind of started polling the community, specifically the African American community, I was surprised that very few were familiar with his work. And that caused me to kind of double down on this project, because I do consider him America's Shakespeare. He accomplished something that no other American playwright has, and that's detailing the experiences of one people over a long period of time, very very poignantly, with poetic, elevated language, much like Shakespeare. But it really is a singular accomplishment, and South Bend needs to know about it. And I would love it if in 2030, August Wilson is part of kind of the zeitgeist, the kind of common experience of South Bend, that he is just part of the fabric of kind of our artistic awareness. And that's a high bar to try to accomplish. And we understand that and know that it can't just be 10 productions here in our 200-seat theater. It really needs to be embedded within the very fabric, which means in the educational programs, in the cultural organizations, the nonprofits, honestly, the for-profit organizations. It needs to be embraced by everyone. I am happy to say that our first iteration, which was Gem of the Ocean, that happened weeks before everything shut down, we finished that, I think, the 10th of March in 2020 with our school tour, and then the 13th of March is when everything shut down. So I really do just feel so privileged that we were able to get that first iteration finished. Not only because it started the momentum that helped us build that momentum back as we go into it here in the beginning of 2022, but also because I think it showed the Civic's dedication to the issues of social justice. I think restorative justice, the ideas of Black Lives Matter, the concepts that really did gain a new foothold in the summer of 2021. And I would never want to think that we're responsive. We always want to be proactive and trying to get to these issues before kind of you feel like you need to. Right now, theater in general is responding to this with a much I guess it's late to the game response to the need to tell the stories of our African American community and give voice to the makers and the designers and the directors and the actors who have been working so hard for so long with not a lot of opportunity. So I do feel a huge responsibility to continue the momentum of this project now and through now 2030, which my board was happy to hear that I was like, I want to finish this thing out. Let's do this for the next 10 years. So let's get into where we are right now. We just about a month ago started putting our lesson plans into the schools. We have created, thanks to about a dozen or more instructors throughout our region, really robust lesson plan books. This is the one we used for Gem of the Ocean. This is the one we're using for Joe Turner, but I mean, it's over 100 pages. I think this one is 13 lesson plans, and those are really multidisciplinary in the same way that August Wilson's writing is. It taps into poetry, into history, into sociology, into psychology, into language, poetry, arts. He really does tap into all of that, and we hope that our lesson plans do the same thing. We're actually getting those copyrighted, and by the time we're over, we will have an incredible resource for other theaters, other educators, other nonprofits that want to teach this work. So I'm really proud of the organization and the work of Tatiana Botero. If you know her, she is a force to be reckoned with, and she works with development and engagement here at the Civic, as well as doing 100 other things for Notre Dame and El Campito and other organizations. So I want to give her a shout out. So the second play, the one we're working on right now, is called Joe Turner's Come and Gone. I'll give you a little bit of a synopsis there. It's set in a boarding house in Pittsburgh. Like I said, most of them are set in 1911. And a couple runs a boarding house to provide services to the displaced, and mostly the African-American community. And this is definitely a great migration story. 1911, definitely the beginning of that process where free Blacks from the South, are migrating up to the North. Harold Loomis, the I guess, protagonist of the play. And again, this is fun too. And I say fun, I hope it's fun for you, but it's fun for me. Herald is spelled H-E-R, i.e. a herald of a message. And August Wilson does this. That's kind of the poetry of his characters. In Gem of the Ocean, a character is introduced called Aunt Esther, which if you say it fast enough, you realize it stands for ancestor. And he does this throughout the plays to say that these characters represent more than just the individual. They are archetypes in many ways. So this is the archetype of the searcher. He is trying to find his wife and trying to find, in a more, again, metaphoric way, his song. And that idea of music, of rhythm, of story woven within the arts is something that happens throughout all of August Wilson's work. So it's considered, it was considered by Wilson his favorite piece. It is beautiful. One of the main things is something called the Juba, which is a dance that's kind of created out of the organic sounds around a table. So we're really excited about creating that piece. We're building the show at Adams High School. And we're doing that so the most possible kids can see the show. We realize that transportation in the South Bend school system is really challenging. So we want to take any hurdle that may be there for them not to be able to come and see this show to be taken away. So we will have a single school performance, daytime school performance at Adams, where we're going to try to get hundreds of kids from across the system to come and see that show, and then have a talk back with the cast and director. So those are the kind of things that expand the experience beyond just seeing the show. They have the opportunity to learn in the classroom and then to learn from the cast itself after they've seen the production. So we're doing our best to try to create 360 experiences for these kids. And honestly, it's interesting. I was told by some of the folks in the system, these kids aren't ready for this. And I was like, no, they're ready for this. They want this really bad. And it was interesting to see almost the shocked faces on administrators when we had Gem of the Ocean at both Clay and Adams. The kids absorbed it like sponges and had the most incredible questions. And what a wonderful interaction we had that I think helped them realize the importance of talking about these issues. And I'll say, these are not light plays. These are tragic plays, and that'll lead me to something else eventually here in my conversation. But racism, systemic racism, displacement, great migration, job inequity, housing inequity, so many things are dealt with in these plays. And even the character of Joe Turner is a historic character that is that the students need to know about some of these, post-emancipation proclamation stories that lingered through the next 150 years. Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. I see that. And I will touch the elephant in the room, which is critical race theory. First of all, nobody knows what that is that are complaining about it. And this is such a wonderful way to talk about race in a way that is personal, that is experiential, that isn't just a bunch of facts on a page. This is lived experience. This is something that happened. And as you enter this space and have a collective experience, you start to have that empathy, you start to have that compassion and understanding that makes you want to study the issues that have affected our country for hundreds of years at this point. So I know George down there, I see his face. We are trying to work with the Civil Rights Heritage Center as much as we can. Hopefully the students who see this will want to go and talk to George and talk to Daryl and learn more about South Bend's experience with these issues, which we have been experiencing for hundreds of years as well. But the play will be in February of 2022. I think it's the 11th to the 21st, 5 performances at Adams High School, and then 1 performance for the students in the daytime performance. Like I said, we're already in the classrooms with our educational packets. Some of the other projects that we're working on around this, we're working with a nonprofit called Connect to Be the Change. If you don't know about them, you should. They're doing amazing work in the community. And I was so impressed with them. I actually hired one of their lead co-founders, Loria Perez, and they are basically tackling, as mothers who've lost children to gun violence, the plague of gun violence that's affecting our city. So I have been really impressed with the work they're doing. We're basically giving cameras and creating really lovely portraiture series and kind of gallery show dedicated to the kids, reclaiming their spaces and showing the community the joy and the life and the vibrancy that is in that community, because too often it's framed as just dangerous and unhealthy and failing. And if you grow up with that being the only narrative to your community, guess what? You're going to start to believe it. So I love that we're giving these kids a chance to reframe their geography and say, these are beautiful places. Yes, they're dangerous. Yes, there are perilous things happening here, but there's also life and beautiful experiencing happening there too. So that's one of the gallery shows that'll be happening at the same time that we're doing that. We're also the director, Michael Pogue, who's coming in from Chicago. He has incredible, like a 10-year background of experience dealing with what is called the August Wilson Monologue competition. And the August Wilson Monologue competition is just what it sounds like. Directed toward African-American students. Anyone can participate, but it is a monologue competition that allows African-American students to tap into the incredible poetry power of August's monologues, and then that continues from a regional competition into a national competition in New York City. So we're really excited about Michael coming in, teaching us how he's worked in Chicago on that project, embedding himself potentially in our schools to get that monologue competition started, and then letting South Bend, basically just championing these kids who are kind of imbuing the soul into these monologues and really being empowered by them. So I think that's going to be a great kind of tangential parallel program that'll go along with what we're doing with the actual performance itself. So as you're hearing, you know, the Civic is committed not only to great performances, but great partnerships and finding ways to not just tell stories, but give the microphone to communities so they can tell their own stories. I'm realizing more and more as these partnerships blossom that it's my job not to do for, but to basically to open the resources that we have to communities that haven't in the past had that access. So if there are ways, if there are people, if there are students, if there are any of those folks that you think would benefit from or would enjoy being part of this particular initiative, please send them my way. I'll put my contact information in the chat as I finish up here. But this is just one of many projects that we're doing here at the Civic. We are going to be basically living with August Wilson for the next decade. But I want to make sure I'm emphasizing something I've been learning over the past 2 years, which is variety of story or variety of experience. If the Civic is only telling stories of trauma, and that is not a full representation of specifically the African American experience. So we have to do better of telling a wider breadth of experience, and that is something that I'm asking for too. You know, we're making our play selection committee much more diverse. We're diversifying our board and our staff. We're doing a better job of basically injecting the ideas of IDEA, which is inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, into all of our programming. So if there are stories of Black joy, Black success, vibrancy within the community, please send them my way too, because we need to be telling those stories as well. We can't just be telling August Wilson, because it's basically like doing Shakespeare, but only doing the tragedies. So we have to be careful about that. So yeah, exactly. Elizabeth said, giving the microphone to people to tell their own stories. That's exactly right. And one of the ways we're doing that, raise hands. I'm going to try to make this interactive if I can. Raise hands who have heard of the Better Homes of South Bend book. Yes. Okay. Good job. Well, we are working with the author of the book itself from IUSB, Gabrielle Robinson, and also an African-American playwright, Colleen Jennings, who has done this kind of historical theatrical presentation before in some of her writings, to make that into a full-length dramatic production. And that's going to be super cool. There's already a first draft in process. We will have a reading in 2022, and the goal is to have a full-length production in 2023. That's one of the ways that we're trying to tell our stories, not just stories that are resonant, but actual, not hidden, because I know, per my poll there, that a lot of you know about it. But again, I've gone kind of just polling the street, so to speak, and a lot of people don't know that story. So again, it's bringing those, I don't want to say lost, but maybe undertold stories to life. That's something I want to do with the Civic too. So again, if there's any, I know this group is a great place to find those stories from South Bend's history that may need a little boost, that may need we need to remind our community of these successes, of these triumphs that have happened in our community. So I ask all of you, please come to me and share. That came because somebody read the book and said, hey, this is a great story, the Civic should get involved. And 2 years later, now we have a real beautiful commission that has been created to turn that into something really powerful, I think. So, but it's all okay. Look at this. See, George Garner, thank you. Perfect. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I feel like it's a mandate for the Civic to not only tell great stories, but tell South Bend's stories. So thank you for your belief in that too, I think. And, working with the History Museum, working with, so many different organizations that do understand the Civil Rights Heritage Center. There's some great institutions, in this city that can help us continue to do that. Yeah, we'll still be doing musicals like The Full Monty and Something Rotten and a bunch of other crazy stuff too, which is a blast and it's fun. But I think this is something that a good civic theater should be investing in. So that's why we're committed to some of that work that may seem foreign, if you think about the work that we've done in the past. We'll be doing Crowns in 2023, I think, working with Humano Unidad, which is a beautiful play, and doing like an exhibit throughout the entire theater of church hats. I think that could just, with the stories and the individuals who wore them, beside them, there's just, I really feel like the sky's the limit for some of these collaborations. So yes, thank you. Yeah, Gabrielle is fantastic. She's just a powerhouse. So I feel lucky to know her as well. So I've been talking for a while. I'm happy to talk about the 22 season, which we just announced. Some of the struggles of coming through the pandemic. I will say that organization is still in the black, which is fantastic and a blessing. And because of the generosity of so many of our donors and sponsors and supporters who just believe in what we do and helped us sustain through an unprecedented time for public facing nonprofits. So I guess I'll end my official talk with just a general and profound thank you to this community for supporting us. The study guides are mostly based for high school, and that's just because the tone of the plays and some of the subject matter is a little, I don't know. I feel like it's best suited for high school. 7th and 8th grade would probably be fine, but as far as the study guides, we're focusing mostly on high school.
Very good. Does anyone else have a question? And maybe, I don't know if you would want them to just say it.
Yeah, please. I mean, if
say
somebody
their
wants to
question.
come
There's
out
your,
of
that'd be
mute.
your interactive piece.
Some people have asked about high school students in the South Bend Community School Corporation, and I actually have one as my guest today.
Woo.
So Tori is a sophomore at Clay High School. And so I thought maybe if you have any questions, she's been taking notes while you've been talking, Erin.
Great.
I don't have many questions.
Well, Tori, I hope you can get involved, whether it be with August Wilson or with any of our projects. We have tons of opportunities for volunteers if you want to get involved in the theater. We have over 700 volunteers every year. And even if it's just trying to see a play for free by ushering or something like that, we'd love to have you.
All right, thank you.
I'd like to comment on the crowns, the idea of you having that again. That was a play that I saw at the theater that used to be out on Portage, that fire.
Oh yeah, the firehouse, yeah.
And I never forgot it. It was just so delightful. I'm glad you're bringing that back. All
And
of
there
our
was-
church hats.
Yes, I think we have to celebrate the experience of our community. And I think for a while I was a little hesitant to get into whether it be religion or politics or any of those things. But I think as long as you're entering the space with compassion and empathy and understanding, I mean, those are some of the issues that are really affecting our country, and to just avoid them completely, I think is a disservice. That it's interesting, Oskar Eustis, who is the artistic director of the Public Theater in New York, he has a TED Talk, which I would recommend you all go watch. And it's theater is essential to democracy, is what he says. And a lot of it is just because it's one of the only places where you can enter the experience of someone else and understand their lived experience, understand in many ways their worldview. And if you're so polarized and so filled with that echo chamber, you'll never truly get the kind of understanding you need to be a participant in a democracy. So I think that that play does that, helps us understand a community that often you may not have the opportunity to get that fly on the wall experience. And those are profound opportunities that I think theater allows. And I will with that in mind, invite all of you to see the Thanksgiving play, which is opening tonight at the Civic. And it is one of those kind of plays. It's written by a Native American playwright, Lakota tribe member, Larissa Fasthorse. She wrote the play because she kept getting told that theaters couldn't produce plays with Native American actors because they didn't have any Native American actors. And she was like, okay, first of all, that's not true. But second of all, okay, I'll give you that. And so she wrote a play about Native American themes with only white actors, basically as a satire of the woke, of the kind of hyper woke, politically correct environment that we're in right now. And it's simultaneously hilarious and cringe inducing. And I think all of you as, political minded people kind of existing in the world today will watch it and just, I hope, laugh your butts off, because it is very, very funny. And I unfortunately there are some lines in the show that I have said recently, and I was kind of indicted by them and said, "Oh, Aaron, you need to do better." And if that isn't the best way, through humor, to be kind of woken up to your performative wokeness, I don't know what is.
Oh,
But it skewers everyone equally. I will say no one will exit the theater probably untouched.
How long is that running, Aaron?
Just 2 weekends. It's sold out tonight, but it'll run through, I'm looking at my master calendar, through the 21st. So this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Wednesday through Sunday next weekend. Yeah, Elizabeth, I see your comment on that. That's exactly right.
Aaron, I'm sorry. Aaron, I went a few years ago to Chicago to see a production of Richard Wright's Native Son.
Oh, yeah.
And I came back home thinking Richard Wright in that play was writing for a white audience, it seemed to me. And one of the things I appreciate about August Wilson is that he writes, I shouldn't say for a Black audience, but he writes from a Black inside out.
Mm-hmm.
There's such a radical difference in his view than in a lot of other plays about Black people. And I just wanted to throw that out and ask your impression of
Well,
it.
it's interesting because Wilson was biracial. I mean, his father was white, his mother was Black. And it's interesting to see him embrace the Black perspective. It felt like so many people were trying to do the opposite. Even the new movie that's come out, Passing, I'm sure George can speak to that, much more eloquently than I can. But, it seemed like August leaned into his African-American heritage. And I think that's a powerful testimony just from the beginning. I do think his use of language is incredibly powerful. And if you, when you read them and when you, I have not been an actor for obvious reasons in those plays, but as an actor, it is a challenge because you do need to take on a different way of speaking, specifically in kind of the earlier plays in the cycle.
Mhm.
But throughout all of them, there is certainly almost a dialect that's used and in those plays, and I think that's it lends a poetry to them that's the best way I can explain. It feels like you are experiencing the culture in a pure form.
Yeah.
And I love that about it. I mean, it just rings so authentically. And I know that he would sit in diners and, he did most of his work there. And if you watch there's that documentary, The Ground on Which I Stand, he listened. A lot of it wasn't internal, it was external, the things he heard. He wanted to make sure he was working that authentic way of speaking, way of communicating into the plays. And I think he accomplished that incredibly well.
Thank you.
And George, I mean, I think that's an interesting conversation of what used to be called Ebonics has now been kind of renamed. What is the acronym that's being used right now for that kind of received African-American English?
AAVE.
I think that's right. Yeah, African-American Vernacular English, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which again kind of goes into some of the challenges we're dealing with in the educational system. But I will thank 100 Black Men of South Bend. They've been an incredible partner in this. We'll have a performance where we'll have a couple hundred from that organization in attendance. I know, I think, was he here? Alfred Guillaume was on, I think, for a second there. And the Friedman Academy is
I'm still here.
there he
I'm
is. Hi.
still here, yeah.
So I want to give you a shout out because I know the lesson plans, the hope is that they'll be used at Friedman Academy as well.
I have to pick up my my lesson book.
I got one for you anytime you come in.
I gotta
We'll
pick
get
it
you the
up.
PDF. We'll get you the PDF of it too, so you can just cut and paste.
Yeah, I will pick it up. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Elizabeth just asked a question. For those of you not looking at chat, do most community theaters engaged in public partnerships, community education, the way the Civic does? No. I mean, a short answer. I mean, some do. Educational partnerships are usually into like classes and camps and things like that, which are more, basic theater skills, theater toolbox kind of stuff. I feel like it needs to go deeper. And I feel like if you want to break the cycles of this kind of ivory tower mentality that the arts often have for good reason, you have to be in the community actively and not just, hey, come see our show, but what do you need? What do you want? And not, here's something that we've developed for you without your involvement. I think the most important word, if I was saying how to create good partnerships, is just relationship. I can't tell you how many times in the past 2 years someone comes to me and says, hey, how about this? Or, hey, here's this cool idea. And I'll be like, thank you. And it had nothing to do with me. I'll give you a great example. We just had this incredible step show called Step Africa that happened because of an amazing partnership with Ivy Tech and one of their diversity and student life officers named Dexter Overall. And I can't remember who introduced us. I think it was Alfred or Arnold, Sally, I'm not sure, but he's been amazing. We've had 2 shows already, and that's coming directly from something that Ivy Tech wanted to do called Soul Sessions, which is basically creating artistic, performative opportunities to explore cultural competency, basically. And we have a theater. He had a great idea, and the two came together to create a really beautiful performance. That it was Arnold. Okay, thank you. But that is a great example of just having a network, having a relationship. Arnold knew that I was serious. He put us together. It turned into something beautiful. So I think it's just getting in the community and having people vouch for you, to say that you're in this for the right reasons. The humility is there, the willingness to kind of step back and let the stories shine on their own and not try to brand everything. So yeah, I think that's the answer to that question. A lot of groups know they need to, but they aren't investing in the ways I think that really create powerful collaborations.
I just wanted to mention that I think that Step Africa performance kind of illustrated that joy.
Yes.
That you were talking about in the community, as opposed to heavy duty stuff all the time, which, right. I mean, there has to be that too, right. But there also is the other side. And they were just so joyful. It was wonderful.
And I think that's, Melanie, I think that's important to know that it doesn't always have to be a full-length theatrical production. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just opening. Like we had a performance. This is not necessarily the Black Joy, but we had a performance through Brandy Franklin about domestic violence. And that was a one-off. It was a one-night thing, and 90% of the people that came to see it had never been at the Civic Theater before. So it's those one-offs, I think, are as useful, as practical as something on our full season, and we need to be open to that, so we don't have to get so just tied into the shows that are in our production brochure, right? So that's what I'm inviting all of you to as well. You don't have to come and say, hey, I saw this great play in Chicago. It can be, oh my God, there's this great group that I bet they'd want to perform at the Civic, whether it be like Uzima, who is that great drum and dance company, or, the Poetry Den, do a big poetry slam here. There's so many great opportunities. We have an artist who's being commissioned to paint a work around Joe Turner. So it can be visual art. It can be anything. Yeah, and I say, Beth talking about South Bend Symphony Orchestra, we're going to be doing some great stuff with them, including West Side Story in October. And that is another opportunity to work within our West Side and tell that story, kind of parallel to the story of West Side Story.
Even when you did In the Heights,
Oh,
that
yeah.
was that was a first, kind of, to do that totally Hispanic. Right?
Well, and you got to do it right. And that's some of the things that the Thanksgiving play deals with, is how the American theater has changed. It used to be colorblind casting, and then it was color conscious casting. Now it's identity conscious casting. It just changes every couple years. And that's the humility of realizing that we don't have it all figured out, I think, is important, because I think there is an arrogance that can come to say, well, we here in the theater know what we're doing. Well, 10 years ago, we did a really bad job here at the Civic a couple times, and we know that now. And I think we had a whole symposium to kind of apologize for it and say, we're trying to do better. But there will always be that struggle to be more empathetic, more understanding, more willing to share the mic. And that dialogue needs to be open enough to say, we're still learning.
But the fact that we've got it here is wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, but I will
Instead
say,
of Chicago or
Pam,
like
it takes a lot of work. With even casting something like Joe Turner's Come and Gone. And I'll say to each and every one of you, send actors, send designers, send any volunteer my way, because one of the hardest things for us is casting an August Wilson show, because it's not, and pardon the crassness here, but it's not a church show. It's not like The Color Purple, which I would have 80 people audition for if we did that today. But an August Wilson play, it's heavy. It is an elevated language. People don't think they can just step in and do it. We do our best to have a teaching environment as far as our rehearsal room goes. So I would say anybody can come in even without a lot of training and succeed. But it's just, one, it's awareness, and two, it's willingness. And the pandemic, kind of full circle here, has made us realize how valuable free time and home time and family time is. And I think it's going to be even more challenging to get the number of volunteers we need to do what we do. In the past, someone would do 3 or 4 or 5 shows a year. Maybe now they'll do 1 or 2. And I think that's just kind of the ongoing discovery of how we have changed as a culture through the pandemic.
Are we all?
Well, let me see. I'm trying to look and see if there's anything
Okay.
else over here I haven't touched on. Oh, where's Lois? Thank you, Lois. What a kind thing to say. I appreciate that.
Could you talk a little bit more about how those lesson plans are going to work in the school?
Yeah,
and
all of them.
How you're getting the teachers involved and
yeah, we have what's called the August Wilson Task Force, and that is basically some community leaders, some educators. I know that both we have a school board member and I'm blanking on her name right now, but the basically the arts consultant for the whole school system, and all of them have been designed with Indiana standards in mind. So they each, fulfill a, core requirement within the design of the lesson plan itself. So we presented to a full, they have these like meetings that fulfilled their ongoing credit, teaching credits. And we presented there with the lesson plan, shared it to all of the teachers that attended, which was like 60 or 70 teachers, and then have been working through the principals as well. So you can't force it, but you can say, hey, there's this great thing, and the receptivity has been really high. It's hard to know how many times they're being used at this point, but I know that they're more receptive this time than they were the last time. And that's the nice thing about doing something 10 cycles, is that it just becomes more, it's not just a one and done. It is something like, oh, I taught one of those last year and it went really well. Or somebody says, oh yeah, I used one of those, it was helpful. That kind of grassroots adoption starts happening when you do it year after year after year. And I hope that that'll be the case too. And it's kind of interesting because you get to the more well-known titles a couple plays in. So with Joe Turner, with Ma Rainey being next year, we get Fences, we get Jitney, we get a few of those ones that people are more familiar with. I think those adoption rates will be gigantic.
So is it just English teachers or?
No. We're trying to get it into the arts. We're trying to get it into history. We're trying to get it into, even social studies, sociology, psychology, some of the anthropology courses and things like that. There's some of the more specialty English courses, of course, but I think the variety, music, dance, some of those other things like at Clay, will definitely have adoption into those as well. I can read through the resource packet, but we tried really hard to make them interdisciplinary. So like I see here, there's English language arts, history, music, and then a few like citations about, theatrical stuff. So, they have been broken down, I think, pretty well done, pretty effectively. And we're always looking for more teachers that can find ways to, especially Ma Rainey. There's so much depth in that one. Even talking about theology and some of the other things. So to answer your question, more than English, I would imagine the majority of teaching is going to be within English, but we're trying to make sure people understand that it is very interdisciplinary.
Okay.
I just hope I live through the whole series.
Yeah, I do too.
So I have a question. Have you finished with auditions?
We have not. So that we have some COVID issues happening where we postponed yesterday's. My understanding is it's going to be on Thursday of next week, and I will post a link to that too. So if anybody has anybody that they want to recommend to audition for it, we would love to have folks auditioning. There's one white character, a middle-aged white man, and then the rest of them are African-American, and honestly, a wide variety of ages. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity. And like I said, a really talented director. It's a beautiful story. So I think everyone will have a great time in the process itself. This may not have, this audition link that I'm going to send may not have the Thursday on there because that just changed yesterday, but I'm going to put the link in here and that will be updated by the end of the day. But it'll be Thursday, what is that? Thursday, November 18th. Yeah. From 6 to 8 p.m. There you go.
Have you reached out to the teachers of teachers at IUSB?
We have. It's such a weird time because of COVID, and it's still strange. People are still trying to catch up. IUSB is an interesting, as far as the volunteerism of IUSB, because the theater program is relatively small. We run into the issue of majors being required to basically only do stuff on campus. And it's a bit of a shame, but I do understand, you know, as you're trying to have a vibrant theater program on campus, if all your students are just going off and doing stuff everywhere else and you can't do it, you can't do what you have planned. I get it. I do think it's good for students to have a multitude of opportunity wherever they find it, but I understand the limitations of that.
Well, I was also asking about the lesson plans and talking to the professors who teach teachers.
We do have a couple ins there. If you are another one of those, please.
My husband is.
Yeah, please reach out, because you know we want this. We know we have blinders, and we know there's people we haven't talked to about it yet. These are the kind of meetings that help me get the word out. So please let me know, and I'll get you what you need.
Thank you.
You're on mute, Pam.
People wish I'd be muted more often, probably. Unless there are other questions or concerns or comments, we're right near the time when we should be ending.
Well, I just want to reiterate what an honor it is to speak to all of you. You're doing great work in the community, and if there are ever opportunities where the two of us can work together on projects, let's open those floodgates too.
Okay, and Aaron, thank you so much for sharing with us all that you have, and to look forward to. Now I'm going to have to read a whole lot more about August Wilson, because I didn't know a lot of that stuff. So
there's a great documentary. We have a couple copies of it here. So Pam, if you want to come over, I'll give you a copy of it. But it was on PBS, the American Masters series, I think, and it's called The Ground on Which I Stand. It's a 90-minute documentary. It's brilliant.
Okay.
And it does just basically convince you of how important August Wilson is to the American theater canon, and honestly to the African American experience, being through this 10-play cycle.
Okay, because to be really honest, I didn't. I've seen a few of his plays, and I didn't make all that wonderful, rich connection at the time, but I will now.
All right, I hope to see you.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for coming today. And next month we will not do it. We don't have Lunch with the League in December, but we will have one in January, and we have a speaker for that. So look forward to January's speaker, second Friday of the month, every month except December. Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Aaron, once again. Bye-bye.